We live in interesting times.
On tonight's headlines.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will travel next week to the Philippines, the State Department said Friday, as the former U.S. colony increasingly flirts with regional giant China.
R&B superstar R. Kelly turned himself into Chicago police on Friday after prosecutors charged him with 10 counts of aggravated criminal sex abuse against 4 victims, 3 of them minors.
Venezuela braces for a showdown with the military and opposition supporters at the Colombian border as the day arrived when self-declared acting President Juan Guaido insists humanitarian aid will enter the country.
And Virgin Galactic spacecraft reaches an altitude of more than 55 miles, carrying for the first time a passenger in addition to its 2 pilots. Good evening, everyone, wherever you're watching from around the world. I'm Alma Angeles. Thank you for joining us.
We welcome our viewers here in the Philippines and around the world. Good evening. I'm Dennis Lu.
I'm Tyra Lu from Japan Bureau.
U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo will travel next week to the Philippines, according to the State Department, as the former U.S. colony increasingly flirts with regional giant China. Pompeo will travel to Manila on February 28 and March 1 for talks with President Duterte, according to State Department spokesman Robert Palladino. The top U.S. diplomat will be paying the visit on his way back from Hanoi, where he is joining President Donald Trump for his closely watched second summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. President Xi Jinping visited Manila in November, offering trade and investment incentives. President Duterte has bristled at all criticism over his sweeping crackdown on drugs and crime. But President Trump has hailed President Duterte's actions as a sign of toughness.
R&B superstar R. Kelly turned himself into Chicago police on Friday after prosecutors charged him with 10 counts of aggravated criminal sex abuse against 4 victims, 3 of them minors. The bombshell development in the Kelly saga came after a judge approved a no-bail arrest warrant for the 52-year-old who for decades has faced accusations of child pornography, sex with minors, operating a sex cult, and sexual battery. Kelly surrendered to Chicago police at approximately 8:15 p.m. and was taken into custody. He will appear in court tomorrow afternoon, a police spokesman said. Kim Fox, the state's attorney for Cook County, which includes Chicago, told journalists the alleged crimes occurred between 1998 and 2010. A court clerk had earlier told AFP 9 of the charges involved minors ages 13 to 16.
Earlier today, Robert Kelly was indicted before a Cook County grand jury on 10 counts of aggravated criminal sexual abuse involving 4 victims. Aggravated criminal sexual abuse is a Class 2 felony with a sentencing range of 3 to 7 years for a count. It is also probationable. We anticipate that Mr. Kelly will appear in bond court tomorrow afternoon.
It's the second time Cook County prosecutors have charged Kelly with sex crime after a dramatic trial that also involved a sex tape. The musician was acquitted of 21 accounts of child pornography in 2008. In 1994, it was reported he married 15-year-old singer and musical prodigy Aliyah at a secret ceremony in Chicago when he was 27. U.S. media said she had lied about her age on the certificate and the marriage was later annulled. In 2002, the star was charged with child pornography in Chicago over footage that appeared to show him engaging in intercourse and other sexual acts with a girl said to be 13 or 14. In 2017, Kelly was forced to deny allegations that he was holding a number of young women captive in a so-called abusive cult after a bombshell report from BuzzFeed News. He has also been sued privately by a number of women, including some who allege underage sexual relationships and another who says he intentionally infected her with a sexually transmitted disease. The singer has continued to make music throughout the allegations.
Curacao Island authorities blocked Venezuelan opposition supporters from loading humanitarian aid donations onto a ship to sail to their country, the vessel's captain says. The Venezuelans have flown containers to Curacao from private donors in the United States, part of a broader aid effort by Venezuela's self-declared leader Juan Guaido to put pressure on President Nicolas Maduro. The organizers tried on Friday to load the aid onto the Seven Seas supply ship moored in the port of the Caribbean island 40 miles or 65 kilometers from Venezuela's coast. Curacao has become one of the focal points of a volatile standoff between Guaido and Maduro.
Por las autoridades aquí han bloqueado la entrada a los containers para la ayuda humanitaria que tiene que ir destino a Venezuela y no hemos podido embarcar. El barco necesita embarcar esa carga que es primordial para llevarla a su puerto seguro, allá a un destino seguro en Venezuela.
The socialist president has branded the aid drive as sham and accused the United States of plotting to invade his country. Guaido has vowed to bring in aid via Brazil, Colombia, and Curacao in defiance of Maduro and the military that backs him. The use of Curacao as a sea transit point raised the prospect of a maritime confrontation.
Meanwhile, Venezuela's opposition leader Juan Guaido claimed the military helped him defy a travel ban by the government of President Nicolas Maduro as he joined thousands over the Colombian border on Friday for a charity concert to push for humanitarian aid deliveries.
Y estamos aquí precisamente porque las Fuerzas Armadas también participaron en este proceso. Esa es la verdad.
Maduro is trying to prevent food and medicines from entering the country as tensions over access to the supplies turned deadly, prompting an angry condemnation from the United States. Humanitarian aid has become a key focus of the power struggle between Maduro and Guaido, who has been recognized as interim leader by more than 50 countries. Guaido delivered a blow to Maduro as he turned up unexpectedly at the concert in the Colombian border town of Cacata, claiming the armed forces participated in this process to help him flout his travel ban. Hours later, Caracas said it had sealed the Colombian border across the whole of Táchira, the western state that borders Cacata, citing threats to Venezuela's security. The powerful military's backing is crucial to the viability of the socialist leader, with defections strengthening Guaido's hand.
The tensest standoff over aid claimed its first casualties Friday as two indigenous people were killed trying to prevent troops from sealing unofficial pathways across the Brazilian border. An indigenous woman and her husband were killed and at least 15 other members of the Pemon indigenous community were injured, said a local human rights group, Cape. The violence occurred in southeastern Bolivar state, close to the border with Brazil, which Maduro ordered closed on Thursday. The U.S. strongly condemned the Venezuelan military's use of force, the White House said Friday, after troops shot dead 2 indigenous people who were part of a group trying to keep the country's border with Brazil open to humanitarian aid. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres also warned Venezuelan authorities not to use lethal force against demonstrators. The Venezuela Aid live concert in Cacata was organized by British entrepreneur Richard Branson in support of Guaido's humanitarian aid relief plan.
Venezuela. Venezuelans are suffering, and that is why millions are crossing the border every day. Well, not millions every day, but millions have crossed, and tens of thousands are crossing every day trying to leave Venezuela. Look, thank you for coming today. It's wonderful to see hundreds of thousands of people coming to the concert. Hundreds of thousands of Venezuelans, hundreds of thousands of people from Colombia.
A rival pro-Maduro concert was taking place a few hundred yards away of the Venezuelan side of the border in Urina. Maduro's rival concert, decidedly smaller and featuring Venezuelan and Cuban artists, began hours later.
Here has been unbelievable. I mean, when you think this was organized in less... Venezuelans are suffering, and that is why millions are crossing the border every day, not millions every day, but millions have crossed.
Eagle News International will be right back. Stay tuned.
Nigerians began voting for a new president on Saturday after a week-long delay that has raised political tempers, sparked conspiracy claims, and stoked fears of violence. Some 120,000 polling stations began opening from 7 o'clock GMT, although there were indications of a delay in the delivery of some materials and deployment of staff, AFP reporters said. Results are expected from early next week, with the winner gaining control of Africa's most populous nation and leading oil producer for 4 years. President Muhammadu Buhari was one of the first to vote and emerged from the polling booth in his hometown of Daura in the northwest state of Katsina to say he was confident of victory. So far, so good, he told reporters. I will congratulate myself. I'm going to be the winner. His main challenger, Atiku Abubakar, 72, is expected to vote in his home state of Adamawa in the northeast. Electors are also choosing 360 members of the House of Representatives and 109 senators from a choice of 6,500 candidates.
And staying in the region, almost 7 million people in South Sudan could face acute food insecurity at the height of the lean season from May to July, according to 3 UN agencies. In an appeal for scaled-up humanitarian assistance and better access in the country, the Food and Agriculture Organization, the UN Children's Fund, and the World Food Program say that the number of people who are acutely food insecure has already increased by 13% since January last year. Harvests are worse than last year, owing to years of conflict, displacement, and economic crisis, and needs are greatest in Greater Upper Nile, Bahr el Ghazal, and Equatoria. According to the latest food security data, 30,000 people are already in a pre-famine situation without help. FAO has warned this number could rise to more than 250,000. Here's Stefan Dujarric, spokesperson for the Secretary General.
Turning to South Sudan, nearly 7 million people in that country could face acute food insecurity at the height of this year's May to July lean season, according to a report released today by the South Sudanese government and our colleagues at the UN Food and Agriculture Organization, the UN Children's Fund, and the World Food Program. The Integrated Food Security Phase Classification Report shows that the number of acutely food insecure people has already increased by 13% since January of last year. Food insecurity continues to be driven by the effects of conflict, insufficient food production, and associated population displacement. The agency said there's an urgent need for more funds to scale up humanitarian assistance to save the lives and protect livelihoods.
Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir declared a nationwide state of emergency on Friday and dissolved the government in an effort to quell weeks of demonstrations that have rocked his iron-fisted rule. Deadly protests have broken out across the East African country since the government tripled the price of bread on December 19, with demonstrators accusing the government of mismanaging the nation's economy and calling on the veteran leader to step down. Protest organizers vowed to press on with their demonstrations until Bashir steps down. Late on Friday, crowds of protesters took to the streets in Omdurman, the twin city of Khartoum, but were quickly confronted with tear gas by riot police, witnesses said. Hours after he made his announcements, Bashir issued 2 presidential decrees, appointing 16 army officers and 2 security officers as new governors for the country's 18 provinces. He also announced that 5 members of the outgoing cabinet, including ministers for foreign affairs, defense, and justice, would retain their portfolios. Bashir has remained defiant in the face of demonstrations dismissing protesters' calls for him to step down after 3 decades in power. Demonstrations first erupted in the farming town of Atbara, but the rally swiftly mushroomed into a major challenge to Bashir's rule. Officials say 31 people have died in the violence, while Human Rights Watch says at least 51 people have been killed, including medics and children. The country's feared National Intelligence and Security Service, NIS, has launched a sweeping crackdown to quell the protesters, jailing hundreds of protesters, opposition leaders, activists, and journalists. Bashir, 75, swept to power in an Islamic-backed coup in 1989 that overthrew the elected government of then-Premier Sadiq al-Mahdi. Bashir has countered anti-government demonstrations with his own rallies, promising economic development and promoting peace.
North Korea's Kim Jong-un will soon make an official visit to Vietnam, Hanoi said Saturday as it beefed up security on the Chinese border, where Kim is expected to cross by train ahead of his summit with U.S. President Donald Trump next week. Vietnam is hastily preparing for a second summit between Trump and Kim on February 27th to 28th in Hanoi. And sources have said that North Korean leader is likely to arrive ahead of the meeting for an official visit and to tour industrial zones. Pyongyang has not yet publicly confirmed the summit with Trump and routinely keeps Kim's travel plans shrouded in secrecy. Several sources told AFP Kim is expected to arrive in Vietnam by train ahead of the summit, stopping at the Dong Dang train station near the China border and driving 170 kilometers or 105 miles to Hanoi by car. Vietnam on Friday announced the unprecedented move of closing the stretch of road from the station to Hanoi on February 26 between 6 a.m. and 2 p.m. State media reported, suggesting Kim could travel on the road between those hours. The 4,000-kilometer rail journey from Pyongyang to Vietnam via Beijing could take 2.5 days in Kim Dark's green armored train, which is reportedly outfitted with conference rooms and several sleeping chambers. He is expected to pass through the Chinese city of Dan Dong, where guests at a hotel facing the border bridge from North Korea were suddenly asked to leave Friday. The hotel was closed Saturday for impromptu renovations.
All right, meanwhile, ahead of the second U.S.-North Korean summit next week, Chae Yong-ho, the former North Korean deputy ambassador to Britain, has criticized U.S. President Donald Trump for falling into North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's trap, adding that North Korea had not posed a real threat of war. Take a look.
에서 김정은은 바로 미국과 북한 사이에 핵 전쟁이 일어날 수도 있다라는 우려감을 전 세계에 확산시키는 데 성공합니다. 미국 대통령 트럼프가 유엔 총회에 가서 북한을 완전히 파괴할 수 있다라고 전 세계에다 이야기한 것은 대단히 큰 미국으로서는 전략적 실수였습니다.
10년사에서 이제 우리는 더 이상 핵무기를 만들지도 시험하지도 않고
바로 미국과 북한 사이에 핵 전쟁이 일어날 수도 있다라는 우려감을 전 세계에 확산시키는 데 성공합니다.
President Donald Trump on Friday ruled out reducing U.S. forces from South Korea as part of a deal in his upcoming summit with North Korea. No, it's not. That is not one of the things on the table, Trump said when asked if he would consider pulling some of the 28,500 troops from South Korea. Trump, answering questions as he met at the White House with a senior Chinese official, said that he would not reveal his bargaining cards ahead of next week's summit in Hanoi. Pressed on what he would offer, Trump quipped, "Everything is on the table." Trump again hailed his relations with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, whom he met in June in Singapore in the first ever summit between the two adversaries. North Korea has never formally ended the 1950 to 1953 war with its neighbor and officially is seeking reunification with the South. But any bid to remove U.S. troops would face strong pushback from the U.S. Congress and Japan, whose conservative government is deeply wary of North Korea's intentions. And South Korean President Moon Jae-in has shown little interest in booting out U.S. troops, in contrast with some of his predecessors who shared his left-of-center ideology.
Heavily bronzed and freshly coiffed, Donald Trump's doppelganger is in Hanoi, meeting with a Kim Jong-un lookalike days before the second summit between the real leaders of the United States and North Korea on February 27th to 28th.
Mr. Kim Jong-un, please fix your haircut. It's awful, okay? Get yourself a stylist, because this whole look, you know, when I do have a private life, and when I go out, it's not very sexy.
The wall is coming. It's going to be huge. China has a wall.
Eagle News International will be right back.
For business news, this is Cesar Vallejos. Reports that U.S. and Chinese officials are now starting with a framework to be used for a possible trade deal between their economies boosted both the Philippine Stock Exchange Index and the peso on Friday. The Philippine Stock Exchange Index gained 0.39% or 30.83 points to 7,962.3 points, which Regina Capital Managing Director Luis Limlingan traced to the update on the U.S.-China trade talks. Limlingan said reports of more indications, particularly from Europe and Japan, pointing to a possible global economic slowdown was outpaced by the news on the U.S.-China trade discussions. Citing reports, Limlingan said China has put forward a proposal to increase by $30 billion annually its purchases from the U.S. to include agricultural commodities such as soybeans, corn, and wheat. This latest turnout was noted by investors, thus the general risk on sentiment in the Philippines equities market during the day. All shares mirrored the main gauge after it rose 0.55% or 26.83 points to 4,883.83 points. Property rose 1.12% and was followed by holding firms 0.60%, industrial at 0.47%, and services 0.26%. However, financials and mining and oil fell 0.99% and 0.19% respectively. Flag carrier Philippine Airlines announced Friday it will undergo a system upgrade by March in a bid to achieve its goal of being a 5-star carrier. In its official social media account, PAL announced that it would upgrade its system to Amadeus Altéa to provide passengers faster and more convenient transactions. In March 2018, PAL signed a partnership with Altéa Suite, a passenger service system that streamlines air travel processes such as reservation, flight management, departure control, among others. Having this airline IT system, according to PAL, would enhance the online check-in processes, make booking experience easier, and make other transactions faster and seamless. PAL earlier said it needs the necessary technology to help the carrier achieve its 5-star goal. In 2018, PAL received a 4-star rating from Skytrax, an international air transport rating organization. The rating was based on the carrier's in-flight and on-ground services. Following the signing of a law updating the decades-old Corporation Code, ang Edukasyon Party List Representative Salvador Belaro Jr. encouraged students to become entrepreneurs. Belaro, one of the principal authors of the amended law, said students at least 18 years old and studying in senior high school or college can soon establish their own companies. The lawmakers said this could be accomplished because the amended Corporation Code now allows the creation of one-person corporation and removes the minimum capitalization requirements enshrined in the old law. According to Belaro, students can avail themselves of microloans for startup capital from the Small Business Corporation of the Department of Trade and Industry or from any microfinance conduits accredited by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Bilaro also said starting a business will no longer be just practice sets, on-the-job training, or through a practicum program because the amended corporation code can let them become entrepreneurs who deal with the hard realities of owning and running a business. The bill's principal co-author, House Committee on Good Government and Public Accountability Chairman Xavier Jesus Romualdo, said the law will allow corporations in the Philippines to respond to and meet the needs and realities of the present times. He added that by updating and modernizing the main body of corporate law, the revised corporation code will encourage entrepreneurship and the creation of new businesses, contribute to ease of doing business, strengthen corporate governance, better protect the rights of stockholders, deter corporate abuse and fraud, and bolster anti-corruption measures and the regulatory authority of the Securities and Exchange Commission. Recently signed into law by President Duterte, the revised corporation code aims to strengthen and simplify corporate governance standards for a more business-friendly environment. The new corporation code will improve ease of doing business in the country by allowing a one-person corporation, removing the minimum capital requirement, and providing for a perpetual existence of corporation. Since the new code allows for a one-person corporation, local business owners and investors could also stop the practice of naming the entire household as incorporators simply to comply with the stringent requirement of the law. Moreover, the new code also allows a one-person corporation to apply for loans and grants. The new code also introduces provisions that seek to remove the minimum number of incorporators, permit the electronic filing of reportorial requirements, and attendance in meetings via remote communication or in absentia, among others, practices that were not recognized in the old law. It also aims to strengthen corporate governance standards and provide protection to minority stakeholders by requiring, among others, corporations vested with public interest to have independent directors. U.S. President Donald Trump on Friday said the trade summit with Chinese leader Xi Jinping was likely to occur next month and hailed 2 days of very good talks by negotiators. The talks were extended through Sunday as officials raced to reach a deal ahead of a deadline next week when U.S. duty rates are due to rise sharply, although Trump said he was considering extending the deadline.
We're having very good talks. There's a chance that something very exciting could happen. This is a deal that would be signed by me to happen. Speaking for the United States, I would say it's probably more likely that a deal does happen. But we have a deal on currency and currency manipulation, yes. If we're doing well, Jeff, if we're doing very well on the negotiation, I could see extending that.
Trump said he expected the meeting with Xi to be held in March at Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida, which is where the leaders can strike the ultimate bargain. He said an agreement on currency manipulation will be included in the trade pact. Analysts say the two sides are likely to trumpet mutual agreements to resolve the easier parts of the trade dispute, increasing purchases of American exports, more open investment in China, and tougher protections for intellectual property and proprietary technology. The harder parts covering issues like scaling back China's ambitious industrial strategy for global preeminence are another question. China is reportedly proposing to increase its imports of U.S. energy and agricultural exports significantly. Wall Street, which had been up for most of the day on optimism about the trade talks, reacted coolly to the news, sparing some of the day's gains, with the Dow Jones Industrial Average up nearly 0.5% shortly, around 20:30 GMT. Zimbabwe started Friday to trade its new currency, the RTGS dollar, 2 days after the central bank announced measures to try and resolve a chronic monetary crisis. On Wednesday, the bank unveiled a foreign exchange trading system that effectively devalued its quasi-currency, the bond note, which was officially pegged at parity with the US dollar. Here's the report.
Zimbabwe's central bank announced on Wednesday that it is introducing a new interbank foreign exchange system. The new policy, in essence, devalues the local bond note, the quasi-currency which exists in note and electronic form, introduced in 2016 by ousted leader Robert Mugabe to address cash shortages. The local bond will be a tradable domestic currency alongside the greenback, South African rand and a number of other foreign currencies adopted in 2009 after hyperinflation rendered the local Zimbabwe dollar unusable. The country's Reserve Bank governor says the move will ensure that no one goes to buy currency from the parallel market and that it will have a positive impact on prices.
Prices in Zimbabwe should remain at their current levels and or to start to decline in sympathy with the stability in the foreign exchange rate, given the current monetary balances have not changed.
Announced on Wednesday that it is
With the sustained growth, infrastructure projects popping up all over, and new oil revenues expected from 2021 onwards, President Macky Sall says that Senegal is on the road to economic emergence. However, critics denounce the growing debt levels needed to sustain such success.
Last month saw the inauguration of one of the key projects of Senegalese President Macky Sall. This regional express train line links Dakar with its suburbs, as well as the purpose-built town of Diamniadio and the international airport, which opened in 2017. These projects are part of the ongoing plan to make Senegal an emerging country. The aim is to rapidly develop the nation and put Senegal on the list of economies to watch for the future. But there's a long way to go for a country which is currently among the 25 poorest in the world.
Depuis que le PSE a été mis en œuvre, nous avons vu que le Sénégal a eu...
During the almost 4 years of the Emerging Senegal Plan, from 2015 to 2019, we had an average growth rate of 6.5% over the 4 years.
But opponents of the plan criticize the costly investments, which load the country with debt that does not appear to bring immediate benefits to the population.
We are an undeveloped country. We have basic needs like water, electricity, education, health.
But the government says that education is a key priority in the second phase of its development program, for which they have recently secured $14 billion worth in funding from donors. To reduce its debt levels, the Senegalese state is hoping to turn the country's oil and gas deposits into a major source of funding. They estimate that these natural resources could bring in $30 billion over 5 years. Although, pointing to the volatility of crude oil prices, economists warn that the government should not get ahead of itself.
What is important is to get growth going. That's been done. Now we must keep the momentum going and increase it. We're not at full speed yet. Senegal will be at full speed when we hit a 10% growth rate.
The Senegalese government also hopes to encourage private investment to ensure maintained economic growth all year round.
That's it for business news. This is Cesar Vallejos. I'm one with 25. Eagle News International will be back. Stay with us.
Welcome back. Virgin Galactic's spacecraft reached an altitude of more than 55 miles, that's 88.5 kilometers, on Friday, carrying for the first time a passenger in addition to its 2 pilots. Spaceship Two, built by British billionaire Richard Branson to carry tourists into space, launched from California's Mojave Desert and flew to an altitude of 55.87 miles or 89.9 kilometers, the company said. The U.S. definition of space is anything over an altitude of 50 miles. The Virgin craft made it past that for the first time in December, reaching an altitude of 50.9 miles. Branson announced with great fanfare the time that it was the first time since NASA ended its space shuttle program in 2011 that an American vessel had carried humans into space. However, the Virgin craft still has not crossed the international accepted boundary between Earth's outer atmosphere and space, known as the Kármán line, which is set at an altitude of 62 miles, or that's 100 kilometers. The spacecraft traveled at a speed of Mach 3, or 3 times the speed of sound in its ascent, and landed without incident at the Mojave Spaceport. It is designed to carry 6 passengers, but test flights are years behind schedule in large part because of an accident that killed a test pilot in 2014. Branson said earlier this month that he hoped the test flights would be far enough ahead by July that he would be able to join the flight. For the first time Friday, the flight carried a passenger, Virgin Galactic's Beth Moses, who will be in charge of training the company's future space tourists. To take off from the ground, Spaceship Two is carried by another larger plane, White Knight 2, which resembles a combination of 2 airplanes attached by their wingtips. When it is high enough, it releases the spaceship, which then fires up its own rocket engine and ascends for roughly a minute into space. At the apogee, its passengers float in zero gravity for several minutes. It then descends and glides back to the landing strip.
Holiday in space could soon become a reality. Today, the space tourism market is dominated by 2 private U.S. companies. Let's find out more.
A holiday in space. It's a dream that could soon become a reality. Today, the conquest of the space tourism market is dominated by 2 private US companies. Virgin Galactic, founded by British billionaire Richard Branson, and Amazon chief Jeff Bezos' Blue Origin. Neither is offering an orbit of the Earth. Rather, tourists will be propelled dozens of miles into the atmosphere for just a few minutes. The aim is to get close to the imaginary line where space begins, the Kármán line, 100 kilometers up where the sky darkens and the curvature of the Earth can clearly be seen. Virgin Galactic will have 6 passengers on board Spaceship Two VSS Unity, attached to a carrier spacecraft. Once released at an altitude of 15,000 meters, the spacecraft will fire its rocket and head for the sky. Their passengers will float in zero gravity for several minutes before returning to Earth at Virgin's spaceport in the Mojave Desert in New Mexico. Price of a ticket, $250,000. Blue Origin has developed the New Shepard, a traditional rocket carrying a capsule with a capacity of 6. After the launch, the capsule breaks away and continues its journey while the rocket returns to Earth. Passengers will be able to leave their seats and for a few minutes take advantage of the view through large windows. The capsule then falls gently to Earth. SpaceX and Boeing are developing their own capsules to transport NASA astronauts from 2020. They're likely to cushion their investment by offering private tourist flights. A US startup called Orion Span hopes to place a luxury space hotel into orbit. The company says it hopes to welcome its first guests in 2022.
Don't forget to like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Tumblr.
Also check out our boards on Pinterest and pictures on Instagram.
I'm Dennis Liu.
And I'm Tyra Liu.
Thanks for joining us, and that's it for tonight's broadcast. I'm Alma Angeles, and
We are one with 25.
Thank you.